Bilingual Redditors, have you ever heard someone talk about you secretly in another language that didn't think you understood? Living in Germany for a few years, I could understand German. Traveling in a barn somewhere near Augsburg. Little girl around the age of 5 or 6 with her mother sat opposite and pointed at me as asked why I am so black. Mother patiently explains about Afro-Americans and slavery and freedom. Girl waves me while leaving. I am Indian. PS. Thanks for the wedding gold. Kind stranger. Incidentally, tomorrow is my wedding day. I worked as an English teacher in a Japanese high school. I wanted my students to use only English in class, so I never let them know I understood and spoke Japanese. For a year I overheard them talk about how long they thought my big dig was, whether I had a Japanese girlfriend, and so on. At the end of the school year, with all the students gathered in the gym, the principal asked me to make a farewell speech, as I was returning to my home country. So I stepped up to the mic and delivered my speech in fluent Japanese. Ever see 800 jaws drop at the same time? It was glorious. I'm American. I was in Paris on the metro, and I heard these drunk American girls talking about me. I glanced at them and heard one say, "Do you think he's listening?" And her friend said, "No, we're speaking English. He probably only understands French. I don't even speak French. Must have been pretty drunk since like 40% of France speaks English." I think they were more American than drunk. I spent a few years in Seoul and gained near fluency after about a year of immersion. Most days on the street I'd hear something about the size of my nose or my blue eyes. Usually it was satisfying enough to look right at the speaker until they paused, then I'd just introduce myself and ask them about their day. Met a lot of cool people. In some situations it was a game. One of my Korean friends was fluent in English. We used to take the bus together and talk about whatever just to see what happened with the crowd. He spoke English and I replied in Korean. Really messed with the other passengers' heads. Good times. My uncle was on the other side of this. My family is Dutch, and when my aunt and uncle were living in London, she taught him the phrase in Dutch for something along the lines of, "The fat woman is a rig," which they could employ easily without anyone knowing what they were talking about. At least until they went to Amsterdam and the tour guide at the Anne Frank House Museum got a bit surly, and he momentarily forgot which country he was in. TLDR. My uncle called a tour guide at the Anne Frank House a fat itch in her first language. Backpacking in China, a little girl near me asks her dad, "What kind of person is that?" I answered in Chinese, "I'm an American." I get this from kids all the time in Korea. Usually they point and yell, "Hey, I'm Muam." It's a foreigner. Mom starts laughing instead of smacking their kid for being rude. In response, my boyfriend look at each other in horror, then yell in Korean, "Wah." It's a Korean person. Usually the mom and kid go wide-eyed and are shocked. Once on the subway in New York, this young guy tells his friend in French, "Who would wear red pants?" I turn to him and say, "You better watch out. You're not the only one that speaks French." His friend then gets extremely embarrassed and says, "I told ya so." Every day at work. I work in a manufacturing facility with many Hispanic immigrants who like to gossip constantly. They assume that, due to the fact that I am white, I have no understanding of Spanish. But what they don't know is that I went to a school system which required us to take 4 years of a language, where I reluctantly learned Spanish. For 3 years now I've been working there, listening to their gossip about me. I haven't said anything because I like being able to hear what they really think, and find it kind of amusing. At times it has been quite difficult to pretend like I can't understand, but I've managed to pull it off. I'm really looking forward to my last day when I bust out my Spanish and teach them a lesson about being judgmental and shallow. I can speak Polish. By speaking Polish, you can, in varying degrees, understand Ukrainian, Czech, Slovakian, and to a small degree, Russian. I've heard a few things directed to me once or twice. On one particular occasion, 2 Ukrainian girls were talking about me on the subway. but not letting them know I understood. When I had to get off the train, I simply smiled at them and said I understood everything you two were talking about, and left. Their faces dropped. Oh. I have a good one. I'm a gringo but I speak fluent Spanish. At an after-hours nightclub in Miami, I took a break from dancing to go to the ladies' room. While I'm washing my hands, two Venezuelan girls come in. They look me over and the first says in Spanish, not so kindly, "Check out this white girl. She hasn't stopped dancing all morning." Her friend shrugs and says for a white girl, "She can move." I turn around with a big grin and say to the first one in Spanish, "I can teach you my moves if you want." All three of us bust out laughing. They bought me a couple rounds and we danced together for a few hours. Fun times. In Miami it's probably not a good idea to assume someone doesn't speak Spanish, as a major city based where it is. Yup. All the time. I don't really look Hispanic so other people think I'm a different ethnicity and start talking about me in Spanish. It's usually older women about how my shirts are way too low cut and how my bobs are out on display. The guys just usually comment on how big they are and call me chichona, a girl with big bobs. I'm a high school English teacher with mostly Hispanic students. And you'd never know it by looking at me, but I also speak Spanish. I never advertise this to my classes until something like this comes up. I've caught students talking trash about other teachers. About me. Trying to cheat on tests and papers. All kinds of stuff. One time that stands out was when a student warned another one not to try cheating. And she responded with "He's gurito. No sabe nada, he's a little white boy. He doesn't know anything." I looked at her and responded "Sabes guest a gurito en chinta de loc dices, you know. This white boy understands everything you say." There was a moment of stunned silence, followed by some kid in the back going "oh shit." And then the whole class erupted. I was hiking at the Grand Canyon with my friend and my brother a few years back. And there was a small group of young Japanese girls, high school age, hiking behind us. On the way down, I hear them talking about how attractive my brother is. And giggling. I find it funny. But I didn't say anything. They keep talking about him and then later my friend and chatting about who gets who. And still I say nothing. We get to a small overlook with a rock ledge sticking out that's sort of hard to access. And my daredevil brother manages to climb around the backside to get a better picture. One of the Japanese girls sees him and says she wants to go over there too. But she looks like she is going to jump to it, which seemed dangerous. So I told her, in Japanese, that she should go to the other side to climb up. Those girls were absolutely stunned and looked beyond embarrassed. They knew I'd understood everything. I'll never forget it. Mandarin speaker. It happens all the time. The weirdest time, though. I was in a clothing store in Tokyo and a family came up and asked me a question in Japanese. I had no idea what they were saying. And then they started talking amongst themselves in Chinese about how I could possibly get by in Tokyo without understanding Japanese. Yeah. I hear ya. I picked up a summer job at a local fast food joint this summer while on break from college. I'm a white guy from Southern California and, while not fluently bilingual, I speak a fair bit of Spanish. During my first day the rest of the workers, as I found out later, thought I was the owner's son and treated me like I was a king, which really confused me at the time. After they came to the realization I was just a normal guy at a part-time job, the chitter-chatter started and some began to complain to each other that I shouldn't be there. Getting territorial as if I were intruding because I wasn't like them. One woman in particular really didn't like me. About a week into the job I overheard her saying something about me being an asshole and getting in her way. Later on that day she told me to help her with bringing something to the kitchen from the freezer downstairs because she was busy. To which I responded in Spanish. "But you called me an asshole. Why should I help you do your job?" She was taken aback and kind of stammered off, embarrassed and muttering under her breath. Felt good to confront her and watch her get all red in the face. After that happened, people didn't seem to mind me that much. somewhat related. I went to get some breakfast tacos, and while I was in line, one female employee asked another, "Tell Olympia stantes de venir?" I busted out laughing and their jaws literally dropped. She was asking, jokingly, if the other girl had washed her pussy before coming into work. As a brown guy living in Japan, most people assumed I was a tourist and didn't speak Japanese. I used to overhear all kinds of weird, interesting conversations on the train. My favorite would have to be overhearing two Japanese schoolgirls about how hairy my legs are and wondering if it would be possible to make a carpet out of it. I didn't know if I should be flattered or offended. Gave them a wink as I walked out at my stop. Felt pretty badass. I hear this a lot in Germany from English speakers. They talk amongst themselves assuming English is their secret language. Then turn around to ask people something in English, assuming to be understood. What's the thought process there? The best were two German girls though. I was with a Scottish friend, sitting down opposite of them in the subway. They immediately switched their conversation, sexual topics, to atrocious English. It got cringe-worthy really fast. So we missed the chance to let them know that we understood. To avoid embarrassing them, we kept quiet till they got off the subway, just raising the occasional eyebrow. My husband and I, he speaks French and I speak Spanish. We both speak English, were vacationing in France, and while visiting this castle town some years back, stopped for lunch. The waiter thought we were Americans and decided to call me a whore in French when we complained we had been waiting for 1.5 hours for our food to come out, and said we were going to leave and to please give us the check for what we had consumed. I think the waiter was fired that same day when my husband gave the restaurant manager a piece of his mind. In French. I am Hispanic and fluent in both English and Spanish. And people often think I don't speak Spanish. So there was this one time I was at a laundromat folding clothes, while these two Hispanic ladies are at a table across from me folding their clothes. Both of them are speaking loudly in Spanish, so I couldn't help but overhear what they were talking about. They start talking about alcohol. One of them said ever since she got married and had a kid she stopped drinking. The other chick was saying that she loved getting drunk and could not live without alcohol, that she wanted a boyfriend so he could buy her alcohol and take care of her kid. Then they both start talking about their ideal boyfriend. One of them says that she is lucky to have found her husband because he is everything she wanted in a guy. The other chick was listing off a huge checklist of her perfect guy. Hot guy. Must worship her. Buy her everything. Amazing job. Clean. Cook. Take care of kids, etc. She then is interrupted by her friend saying that she was never going to find her perfect guy with her list being so long. She then turns and looks towards me saying, "What about a guy like him?" Her friend immediately rejected that idea. She then began to make fun of my clothes, hair, glasses, everything. I'm a pretty nerdy looking dude. She says how I look like a loser who is doing nothing in life. Probably that I'm poor and won't be able to buy her things. And more. I think to myself that this chick is quite rude and loudly reply in Spanish. I wouldn't be into a chick like yourself. Because I wouldn't want a lazy drunk for a girlfriend. She got silent and just stared at me. Her friend began to laugh uncontrollably. Mexican here. I was on a bus stop once and there were a couple of white Mormons next to me. For what I heard, the tallest one was starting out and was nervous about talking to strangers about religion. The other guy wanted to give him confidence and told him, "Look, he seems dumb. Why don't you practice with him?" Or something like that. Then Elder Tull approached me and asked me if I wanted to hear about Nuestro Señor y Salvador Jesucristo. I immediately answered, in English, "I am sorry, but I believe you might want to execute your learning with a more short-minded individual." Elder Short went pale as a sheet, and when the bus arrived, the only 3 seats were together. That was an awkward trip. For them. I mean. The other side is true. As a sassy teenager I was conversationally adept in French. And I knew all the bad words. So when some chat would cut me off while I was riding my bike, naturellement, they would get a torrent of French cuss words. while made me feel great. Until a rather large hillbilly stopped his pickup and yelled back at me in fluent French. I rode far and fast to get away. Nope, but once I was talking over the phone with the managing director of my company and they didn't know that I could understand some German, and he started talking about some secret event that was going to take place in German. I just typed in Google Translate as they spoke and found out about the whole story.